Well, hello xenographers everywhere and welcome to another episode. For some months now I've been using the Zuiko 1.4 50mm and it's a lens I like a lot. I've made some very nice images with it, it gives great colour rendition, it's very sharp and I've generally got a very good opinion of it. However, I haven't compared it to another similar lens. So today we're going to be comparing the Olympus 50mm 1.4 Zuiko with the Pentax Super Takumar 1.4 50mm. Now, if you've watched this channel before, you'll know that I'm quite a fan of the Zuiko lenses, and this 1.4 50mm is probably my most used lens at the moment. This is a lens that can make some absolutely stunning images. It really is a beautiful little piece of glass. It renders colours magnificently, which is a trait shared with all of the Zuiko lenses, certainly all of the ones that I've used. Because it's an f1.4 lens, this one will give you some very shallow depth of field effects, and it's capable of separating the subject from the background even when you're not too close to your subject. It's sometimes said to be not a particularly sharp lens, but I really haven't found that to be true. I think it's probably more to do with difficulty in nailing the right focus when you're shooting wide open, and indeed that can be a problem with any wide aperture lens, but I've found this one to be very sharp. It's beautifully made, it's all metal, the Zuiko lenses are pretty small for what they are, and it's a very nice little piece of glass indeed. It focuses using this ring here, so the focusing ring is towards the rear of the lens, and it's got this nice diamond knurled finish that makes it very easy to find and very easy to grip. It focuses down to 0.45 of a meter, that's 45 centimeters, so you can get pretty close to your subject. The aperture has click stops, though of course it's infinitely variable between those points. It may not be an ideal lens for video, because if you need to change your aperture on the fly, you're unlikely to be able to do that smoothly because of the click stops. However, I've never found any problem shooting video with this lens. It adapts very well to mirrorless cameras. All you need is a cheap, dumb adapter and you're ready to go. The adapter for this lens, because it's an SLR lens, is bigger than the adapter for rangefinder lenses. It's about an inch long, perhaps a little more, but it sits on the camera without any problem, and it's really not too big at all. It's a lens that you can buy for between probably 60 to 80 pounds or thereabouts. You may find them cheaper, you may find them more expensive, but that's roughly what it's going to cost. And if you want an f1.4 vintage lens, then this one is a very strong contender. Here are some images I've made recently with it. They were all shot wide open at f1.4 because I do like to shoot wide open, and because that shows the characteristics of the lens pretty well. As you can see on these images, colours are very nice, the background blur is very nice, and I think the images this lens makes are very striking indeed. There is one caveat though, because while most of the time the background blur is very smooth and very soft, there are occasions when the blur from this lens gets a little bit busy, and that occurs when you're shooting fairly close to your subject and the background is around about 3 feet, 4 feet away. Under those circumstances, there can be the occasional hint of harshness. Most of the time, however, it's lovely. It gives very soft blur, it gives beautiful bubbles in the background from point light sources, which personally I find very pleasing indeed. Now here is the Pentax 50mm f1.4. This is a Super Takumar version. It's not the original version. The original version of this lens had 8 elements, while this one has 7. And it is said that the 7-element version is slightly inferior to the 8-element version. I can't comment on that because I haven't tried them both. One quick way to check if you have the 7 or the 8-element version is to look at this little line here, the little red line just after the 4. If that little line is outside of the 4, as this one is, then that means that the lens is a 7-element example, and if the red line is inside the 4 next to this red diamond, that means you've got the 8-element version. Now, Takumars of this type did use thorium in the composition of their glass, and thorium is a radioactive element. The amount of radiation exposure you'll get from a lens like this is next to 0, so I can't see that there's any health concerns in using a lens like this. There is, however, a practical concern, which is that over the years the radioactive decay makes the elements yellow. And this lens is no exception. It does have a slight yellow cast, and so I had to play around with the white balance to get it to give true colours. The yellowing can be cured by exposure to ultraviolet radiation, either strong sunlight for several days or, probably better, a UV lamp. This is a very compact lens. It's no bigger than the Zuiko version. It's slightly narrower, though only very slightly. The arrangement of the focus and aperture rings is opposite to the Zuiko, so the focus ring is on the front here, and it's got some grips machined into it. The aperture ring is towards the back of the lens, and we have aperture values from f1.4 at the maximum to f16 at the minimum. This lens has an M42 screw mount, so getting an adapter should be no problem. And this, again, is a lens that makes some very beautiful images. Depth of field is tiny when you're shooting wide open, so you can get some lovely background blur. It's a sharp lens, and in the manner of vintage lenses, this one too is all metal, and it will last a very long time. This lens has the potential to be a stunning picture maker. Colours are very nice, sharpness is excellent, and it's very difficult to fault this little lens. So to begin with, let's have a look at the background blur from point light sources, and here's what the Olympus does, and you can see it makes hundreds and thousands of tiny little bubbles from every point light source, and they're of a very, very pleasing quality. It gives the image a very soft look, it gives it a magical look. Very, very nice results indeed. Here's the Pentax version of the same thing, and in fact, to my eye, this lens gives a more pleasing rendition of those point light sources. Again, it's bubbles. Again, there are thousands and thousands of these beautiful little light sources in the background, but for me they have a more pleasing quality. They're somehow not quite so glaring, somehow not quite so busy. It seems to me that they're rather more subtle, and as a result, rather more pleasing. Here's a shot of one of the giant chess pieces at Port Merion, where many years ago a show called The Prisoner was shot, and you can see that this image is very sharp indeed. The colours are rendered very nicely, and the blur is very soft, very nice, very pleasant, very gentle, lovely to look at, and gives a lovely feeling to your shots. And here's the Pentax version of the same shot. The colours are rendered slightly differently, and this shot seems a little warmer than that from the Zuiko. I think that's probably down to the yellowing of this glass. The background blur is lovely and soft, easily equal to the Zuiko, and you can see that it's a sharp image, although I think perhaps it's not quite as sharp as the image given by the Zuiko lens. Looking at these columns, there's very little to distinguish the two lenses. This is the Olympus version of the shot, and you can see that it's a nice sharp shot. Focus was on the column that's right in the center of the image. We've got a little background blur, and the colours are very nicely rendered too. Here's the Takumar version of the same shot, and here the focus is on the second column from the right. So you can see again this gives a very sharp image, and you can also see that the background blur is very slightly softer in this case. Colours are a little warmer than with the Zuiko. In this shot the focus is right at the back of the shot, so the copper looking dome pretty much in the centre of the shot there. And again, this is a very nice image, very sharp, with good colours. The Pentax version of the same shot is definitely warmer. The focus is on the same spot, and I think you'll agree there is no difference in sharpness, certainly on this shot, between these two lenses. Again, on this shot of the pool, there's very little to distinguish between the two lenses. They're both very sharp, and the only difference I can see is in the slightly more warm feel of the colours from the Takumar. Here's a wide shot of Port Merion, and the focus is on the red building that's pretty much in the centre of the shot there. And it's a very sharp shot indeed. You can see a very great deal of detail. The colours are strong and punchy, even though the light wasn't very good. It was an overcast day. Contrast is very strong, and altogether this is a very nice image. Here's the Pentax Takumar version, and you can immediately see that the colours are warmer. The focus point was the same, that is the red building more or less in the centre of the shot. However, this shot seems a little softer, not quite as sharp as the Zuiko version. The contrast is a little bit lower for sure. That may be to do with varying light conditions, but it's beginning to look like the Takumar doesn't have quite the strong contrast of the Zuiko. Here's an example of the busy bokeh that the Zuiko can produce under some circumstances. You can see in the top left of the shot there, it's not as smooth as it could be. It's slightly distracting from the main subject. Not too bad, but certainly there is a little bit of busyness going on there. Here's the Pentax version of slightly busy bokeh, and to me this actually looks rather more busy than the Zuiko did. That is, it's not as soft, it's somehow a little harsher, it's rather distracting. And if you look towards the top of the image, in the centre, you can see what look like donuts. That's very strange. I've encountered donuts on mirror lenses before, but I've never encountered those round donut shapes on an SLR or a rangefinder lens. This one does seem to produce it in certain conditions. In this area at least, I think the Zuiko comes out as a fairly clear winner. So the results of this initial very unscientific test do suggest that the Zuiko is slightly sharper than the Takumar. It has slightly stronger contrast, and it has cooler colours. The Takumar appears to have rather warmer colours. Of course, I've no way of knowing whether that might persist after the yellowing has been taken away, but as it is now, it certainly is a warmer lens than the Zuiko. There is another caveat here, however, because I think due to the slightly lower contrast of the Pentax lens, it was rather difficult to use focus peaking. It didn't always make clear where the edges of the focus were, and so it's possible because of that I may not have quite nailed the focus in one or two of these images. It certainly can produce sharp images, but personally I found it slightly more difficult to do that because of the focus peaking not appearing to be as strong as it is with the Zuiko. Having said that, all of this depends on the look you're trying to achieve. If you want a lower contrast look, then the Pentax is the one to go for. If you want a slightly harsher look with more contrast, with cooler colours, then the Zuiko will probably suit you better. We can sit here all day and quibble about technical distinctions between the two, but the fact remains I've made some very beautiful images with both of these lenses. So there we are, two fantastic f1.4 lenses from major manufacturers, both of them beautifully made, both of them will last as long as you want them to last, both of them capable of making some stunning images. Thanks to everybody who watches these videos. Please do like and subscribe. The more people who like and subscribe, the easier it is for me to keep producing these videos. I do hope you've enjoyed this one and it's been of some use, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography. Thanks for watching.